Back in the early 2000s, little baby Dawid was a huge fan of god games, particularly Black and White. A game in which you played a god who, aided by your powerful pet creature, had to lead your people to victory over the Philistines on the other side of that hill over there. And to do this, you had to decide whether you wanted to be a benevolent god or a Skeletor-esque deity that sacrifices babies every time you need to cast a fireball. And then, in 2005, Peter Molyneux launched Black and White 2, which blew my mind. The depth of gameplay combined with the hair physics was just too much for my little brain to handle. But the thing is, despite Black and White 2 being one of my favorite games of all time, I haven't played it in well over a decade. And the reason I can't just buy it and download it like you can many other old games is because Lionhead Studio, the developer, and EA, the publisher, are in a legal shiv battle about who gets to publish the game on modern platforms. And at this point, I'm done waiting for these two companies to get bored of their foreplay and decide who gets to take the load in the face. So I've just gone onto eBay and bought the original game. This is a hard copy of Black and White 2, and I've also gotten the expansion pack, which I've never played before. I'm very excited about that. The problem is, it's from 2005, and I'm pretty sure that these games won't work on a modern system. So I've decided to build a high-end gaming system from 2005 to play one of my favorite games of all time. But before we get into that, today's video is sponsored by Micro Center, the best place to get amazing deals on anything PC related. Micro Center always has some awesome sales happening, like their current holiday sales event, where you can get savings on everything from gaming monitors to sim racing gear to even this very fancy looking Creality CR scan. And then you can use that scanner on your discounted Microsoft Surface laptop. And finally, if you live in Santa Clara, there's a brand new Micro Center coming, so sign up for a free flash drive when the store opens. Links are all down below. Oh, that's a very dirty box. Now, they may have dug the box out of an active volcano, but it's still very exciting that it comes in the original box, which is kind of rare for a motherboard this old. And the motherboard in question is the Asus A8 N32 SLI Deluxe. A beast of a motherboard back from the days when you still got like a flap that opened and then you got to see like features and stuff. Now, a fun fact about this motherboard, my brother actually had one of these. He was very excited about the motherboard because this was the first motherboard, as far as I know, that had dual 16x PCIe slots, which was a really big deal for him considering that he just had one graphics card and then never got a second one. But that was the main selling point of the motherboard. Now, considering that this motherboard comes with the box and a bunch of accessories, it cost quite a lot of money. I paid $200 for it, which funnily enough is the same it cost new back when it came out. But I mean, obviously inflation was a thing. $200 was a lot more back then, but still. Oh wow, the seller wasn't lying. These are a lot of accessories. These are cool. Whoa, it even comes with a game port that you can use to connect like old joysticks and game controllers. This is a little blower fan that you could attach to the power delivery heatsink on your motherboard. I mean, this is a cool touch. Let's take that out. Whoa. That motherboard is in pristine condition. Oh, although there's a problem. Oh, there's actually a pretty big problem. Now, the reason for my sudden panic was an essential part of my cooler mounting plan was missing from the motherboard. Oh no, that's kind of a disaster. Now, aside from the fact that this is a remarkable specimen of a motherboard, there is a pretty big issue. It doesn't have the stock mounting bracket with it, which I was kind of counting on that stock mounting bracket because this is a socket 939 AMD socket, which is a very old socket and very few coolers support it. Now, I did buy a period-specific cooler for this video, but Canada Post is on strike, and, you know, good for them, they should get paid more, but it does mean that the thing that I ordered like 2 months ago, it's just gone. I don't know where it is. So I was kind of hoping that I could use that bracket for cooler mounting, because apparently there's a bit of a rumor going around that you can use a Wraith cooler, but you can only use the Wraith cooler if you have that mounting bracket, and it's not on the motherboard. I genuinely don't know what I'm gonna do now. But then I had a potentially brilliant idea.
Can I 3D print one?
Now, considering my history with 3D printing, it may not go very well, but I guess we'll see soon enough.
Next, I want to have a look at the CPU, which is in this packet, which again cost a surprising amount of money. It's been packaged like that. That's interesting. Oh. Okay. Oh, the CPU is just kind of loosely rubber banded to a bit of foam on the back.
And the CPU in question is the legendary AMD Athlon 64 FX55. This baby packs a single core running at 2.6 gigahertz, and it cost an eye-watering $850 when it was launched back in 2004. Adjusted for inflation, that's almost $1,400 US. Now in 2005, AMD did launch a higher-end single-core FX CPU, the 57, which was a slightly more powerful AMD FX CPU available when Black and White 2 launched, but good luck finding one of those. It would be easier to find some genuine approval from your parents. And generally, Athlon FX pricing is wild. The 55 I have here cost me $250 US, but it gets even more expensive as you climb up the ladder. Pricing is so crazy you can buy an FX60 box for $125 US.
So I can't wait to see how this single core beast runs Black and White 2.
And then finally, from our initial haul, we've got the graphics card. Now I did buy 2 of them, but the other one, it's just gone. That's another thing that just didn't come. So we're gonna have to use one of these, which was arguably the fastest graphics card at the time of Black and White 2.
Oh yeah, check it out. It is a 7800 GTX and a Dell variant nonetheless.
A Dell variant with a peculiar cooler on it, because this is apparently a 256 meg version of the 7800 GTX, but as far as I can tell, this is the cooler that came with the 512 meg version. So we'll see what happens when I fire it up, because if it is a 512 meg version, it would be a massive score on my part, because they're super rare, and when they do show up for sale, they're like $5 billion. Now, what I find interesting about the 7800 GTX, aside from its $600 price tag being $1,000 in today's money, but it was a high-end gaming graphics card with a TDP of 86 watts, which just pales in comparison to the behemoths of today.
So with that, it's a good time to go and see if I can 3D print a mounting bracket for the socket 939 on here. So I'm gonna go check Thingiverse and just pray. Okay, please, please.
No way, there's actually a couple? The first option I tried refused to download for some reason, so I was left with the recreation of this stock bracket. So I downloaded the file, threw it into Bamboo Labs' slicing software so that I could begin the arcane process of 3D conjuring. And just like that, I've 3D printed a mounting bracket for my CPU. Now, I did show my 3D printing wizard friend the design, and he was a real downer about it, going on about how the moment there's pressure on it, it's just gonna separate the layers and it's not actually gonna work as mounting hardware. But maybe it will, maybe it will. So I've got some screws. These are radiator screws with random nuts that I found lying around. Wow, socket 939 looks so similar to AM4, but that makes sense. Now I know that I'm supposed to, like, with a soldering iron, seat these threads, but the reason that I'm not doing that is because of how the thread works on the radiator screw. It's not threaded all the way down, so we kind of need a little bit of extra clearance. It's rudimentarily on. That's very skew. I think the skewness is as a result of us not seating the threading properly. So I know what the problem is, but I have a reason for not doing it correctly. And that reason definitely isn't entirely due to laziness. That is actually kind of sturdily mounted. It's looking good, it's looking good, it's looking very professional. Now again,
I did order a cooler that was supposed to be compatible with this, but it just didn't show up. Oh, I really hope this works. It's very annoying when my wizard friend is correct. Come on, please don't break, please don't break. I think we're good for now, until it snaps off when I put it in a case. So one of the reasons why I think it's working, why the print layers aren't just tearing off, is because there's a screw pushing down on it from the top. So there is actually counter pressure on the mounting bracket. I think we're good. Okay, now the power supply is another thing that I'm gonna have to use a modern part of. Now a note on the RAM that I'm using, it was sent over by a viewer like 2.5 years ago, and I'm finally getting around to use it. It's a 1 gig kit of Corsair XMS DDR running at 400 MHz. Now the interesting thing about DDR, aside from it being the first RAM that could handle 2 commands per clock cycle, it also brought the idea of dual channel RAM to the market, so DDR paved the way for pre-built manufacturers to screw you over with RAM configurations. Neat. So now comes probably the scariest part. We have to see if this stuff works. I really hope it does, because this was a very expensive system for what it is. Okay, we've got a light here. That's a good start. Oh, that's a good start. Oh yeah, listen to the power. And not only that, but there are LEDs on this RAM, which is wild. For the time. Like back then, LEDs on stuff didn't exist.
A few moments later.
That's not immediately a great sign. So let me restart it. If these parts don't work, it's a complete disaster. Now my first attempt at troubleshooting involved using single sticks of RAM in different slots on the motherboard, and when that didn't work, I desperately dug through several bins in my office to find another kit of DDR1, which I found, but that also didn't help. Okay, that doesn't sound like posting. The next thing I tried was swapping out the FX CPU for the Athlon that came in the motherboard, which also didn't work. And then when resetting the CMOS in a blind panic also didn't work, I remembered that every time I struggle posting a system, I get hundreds of enraged comments from people telling me to just use a motherboard speaker. And after 40 minutes of looking for one, the post code was not good news. One long beep, 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 3 short ones. I can't find a beep table in the the manual for the motherboard, but there is like a general beep table, and apparently 1 long beep and 3 shorter ones generally means graphics card. So I'm gonna try a different graphics card. I really hope it's not the graphics card, because I don't have an option to replace it with. Oh no, that's a disaster. But then, in these dark times, I remembered that several months ago, I bought a different graphics card from around this period for a different video. And that option is an X1900 XTX, a graphics card that's like the next generation from the 7800 GTX, and one that came out a couple of months after Black and White 2 was launched, so yeah, I don't know, that feels close enough. Let's give this a try. Actually comes in the original box with the sci-fi lady on it. Ooh. Oh yeah, look at that. Now this graphics card was an absolute beast back in the day. We even have 512 megs of video memory, which puts the 7800 GTX to shame. Let's hope it works, because that would also make a big difference. Whoa! It sounds like a jet turbine, but it posts! Yes! Oh yeah, look at that BIOS. Okay, so now that we have a period correct system posted, we need to drop it in a period correct case, which I'm gonna go get in a second, and then we need to install some Windows XP and stuff on it. But let's put it in its case. So this bad boy is a Thermaltake Tsunami Dream. Now, back in these days, Thermaltake made some pretty high-end cases, and you can clearly tell it's high-end by the door that opens on the front. Oh, it's got so much resistance. Now, as you can tell, back in the day, we didn't really prioritize front airflow that much. But, you know, it does get better with the door open than whatever that bit is. We've got the potential for a whole bunch of front I/O on here. Although the person did have to add some USB 3 aftermarket, fancy. And on the side of the case, we've got some perspex with a fan in it, fancy. And to get the side panel off, you have to undo a couple of screws and undo some latches, which also have keys, so you can lock the side panel as well. Now, by modern standards, the interior layout of the case is pretty butt cheeks. I mean, you got all the hard drive cages and stuff in the front, blocking the little bit of airflow that can get through there. Now, the power supply also lives on the top, which isn't great because it has to pull in air from the system. So that's why we don't do that anymore. But for our sacrifice of front airflow, we do get a lot of utility in terms of drives and stuff. Oh, there's a spider! I remember it was such a big deal when like hard drive caddies came out that you could do this like hot swappably, you know? Okay, so now that we have most of our components in, that cooler looks really funny upside down on this old system. But anyway, we need to start with the arduous process of cable managing in this case, and then we can drop our graphics card in here. And when I finally got the system in the case, when I fired it up, it wouldn't post again, for some reason. But luckily it just took a little bit of digging around on the inside to fix the problem, and then we were ready to install Windows XP, which was its whole own problem. Now, initially, installing Windows XP and getting it running was much more straightforward than I was expecting, but then the driver hell started. I, for the life of me, could not get working drivers installed for the X1900XTX. I initially tried the legacy drivers from AMD's website, which didn't work. So I then tried the driver CD that came in the box, which also didn't work. I then DDU wiped all of my failed driver install attempts, installed .NET Framework, and then tried some drivers from Phil's Computer Lab's website, which also didn't work. Okay, so I have spent the last several hours trying to install drivers for this X1900XTX, and I just haven't been able to. For some reason, this system just doesn't want to play with it. I've tried pretty much everything. I know there's going to be a bunch of comments down below of people being like, oh, Dawid, obviously just do this and it'll work. But I've gone through so many resources, but I can't figure it out, and I'm running out of time. Luckily, I did find this in a bin in my office, which is an FX4400, and it's basically the Quadro version of the 7800 GTX, and it's even a 512 meg version. Ooh. So I'm gonna drop this in the system and see if I can install drivers for this one. Okay, that's a good sign. Oh, video art. Yay. And the drivers installed first try with no problem, which was very exciting, and it meant we could finally play some Black and White 2, except there was one more problem. Oh, look, you can like screw with the particle effects in the Lionhead Studio logo. This was very exciting to me back in the day. It's like, oh, particle effects, ATI, look. Oh, it would have been so perfect with the X1900XTX. I don't have audio though. I'm gonna have to go find audio drivers, aren't I? Which again was a complete nightmare. Despite the fact that the driver install apparently worked, Windows just couldn't find the onboard audio on the motherboard. And with another couple hours of struggling, A, my patience was wearing real thin, and B, I remembered that I had a PCI sound card in some system I bought off Craigslist several years ago, the drivers of which luckily installed first try, giving me a full, usable Black and White 2 experience. Oh! 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 I hear Black and White 2. It's very loud, but it's happening. There is some awesome music happening. You are almost definitely not hearing it though, which is, I'm sorry about that. We've got suffering open here. It's defaulted us to 800 by 600, which feels very low. I don't know. I think I'm gonna hit up some 720p. Do we think this card can handle that? Oh, I remember how excited everybody was about Bloom always. Let's try that. I remember this loading screen so well. The duality between good and evil. Oh yeah, look at them graphics. I remember being mind blown by the hair on the devil's boobs. So when this game came out back in 2005, the creature's AI was like peak AI. Wow, it's not going well. We're hitting 18 frames per second. Oh, it feels awful. So what's interesting is we've got 100% CPU load, but 0% GPUs. I'm assuming that overlay isn't working.
Wildly disappointed by the performance of this $800 CPU, I went into the BIOS to see if I could change some settings and get a bit more performance out of it.
Yeah, but I need to readjust my modern expectations of like how the game's gonna run. Okay, dropping the settings is helping. We're getting about 30 frames per second now. But I think this is reasonable performance considering the hardware that we have. Which is wild. I don't remember it running like this.
But soon I got used to the frame rate and honestly, it didn't feel that bad.
Oh, what? You have to tell them to bang as well. Oh yeah, that's that's why I love this game so much. The breeders are doing whatever it is that such people do, apparently. Oh yeah, they're gonna go do some breeding. But it feels fine, you know, it's decent. This is definitely a usable gaming experience. In fact, this is probably how I played it back in the day. If even like this, probably much worse. Because we're pretty much pegged at 100% CPU utilization. So our FX55 is really struggling with this game. So it's good for gamers back in the day that not very long after this came out, Core 2 Duo was launched, which was a huge step up in performance. But this is like an $800 CPU back in the day. Yeah, so what he's explaining now is that the whole city shifts based on how good or evil you are in the game. Which, once you get super good, there are just these flowers and vines that grow on everything. And that also is one of the graphics things in this game that blew me away. You could go and like play with your hand in the flowers and stuff, and it just blew my mind when I was a kid.
And with that, this whole experience just shows me how much our expectations has shifted as gamers over the last 2 decades. But after the initial shock of having to play at 720p 30 frames per second wore off, I was just having a good time playing one of my favorite old games. And I'm definitely not going to immediately go and install this on a much faster system. But anyway, with that, thank you so much for watching. Let me know if you were gaming back in this period and what kind of system you had down in the comments down below. Subscribe while you're on your way down there. And until the next video, bye-bye.